wishing for a new day to come. When the sun rises in the morning, we'll set sail and move on, and we'll be sailing with our Father. You know his ship will never sway. Oh, new hope on the horizon. We found the promised land today. Look out with joy in your eyes. The winds of truth will guide our way, leaving behind the raging sea. On waves of love we'll sail away, and we'll be sailing with our Father. You know his ship will never sway. Oh, new hope on the horizon. We found the promised land today. Darkness, it always turns to light. The promised land is in sight. He is our guiding star by night, and in the day our bright sunlight. And we'll be sailing with our Father. You know his ship will never sway. Oh, new hope on the horizon. We found the promised land today. We found the promised land today. We found that promised land today. It will come about that in the last days, the mountain of the house of the Lord will be established as the chief of the mountains, and will be raised above the hills, and all the nations will stream to it. And many peoples will come and say, "Come, let us go up to the mountain of the Lord, to the house of the God of Jacob, that he may teach us concerning his ways, and that we may walk his paths. For the law will go forth from Zion, and the word of the Lord from Jerusalem, and he will judge between the nations, and will render decisions for many peoples. And they will hammer their swords into plowshares, and their spears into pruning hooks. Nation will not lift a sword against nation, and never again will they learn war." Okay, with that, please give a warm round of applause to Reverend Eric Silty.
Good morning, everyone. It's very nice to see you again this Sunday morning. I want to thank everyone first for giving me time last week to be with my relatives who were visiting, and also I want to to thank everyone who was working here and preparing here for the celebration that we had last week for True Parents Day. You know, when we think of peace, like we do when we read that scripture that comes from Isaiah, everyone's heard that, right? About beating the plowshares, the swords into plowshares. And we think of peace and how much our world needs it, don't we? Yeah, we really need peace. Sometimes it's hard to think about the future when you look at the world and see the things that are going on, the wars everywhere, and the violent acts that desperate people are doing. So I thought it would be good to think about peace a little bit more deeply this morning. And as I said in that email that I sent out, there's a new wave of peace, I believe, that's going to be coming very soon. And you are very instrumental in its coming. And I'll explain that. But first, let's talk about that scripture reading from Isaiah. You know from the Old Testament, the process of the chosen people who developed from the great life that Abraham, the father of faith, brought to us. They were brought into slavery in Egypt, and then they were promised that they would be brought to a new land. They would no longer be slaves, and they would receive a king, a Messiah, who would liberate them and everyone and establish peace on the earth. So that process of going from slavery to receiving their own land and a king, in a sense, who would rule all the kings of the earth, the prophecies were, it's quite a lot to think about when you're a slave. But it did bring the Israelites who were living in Egypt a great deal of hope, and they looked forward to that time. So when they finally were able, with Moses, to leave the land of Egypt, you remember what happened to them. Moses went up to a mountain and he received the 10 Commandments. And he received the instructions about what they were supposed to do in their daily life. They were to build an ark to carry the 10 Commandments and a tabernacle which would surround it. Every day they would set that up at the end of their journey, and special people would carry it. They would honor it and revere it all the way to the time they entered the land of Canaan. That was their responsibility. Now, when we study the divine principle, we see that course was a course to prepare for the Messiah in a very special way. And what were they going to do then once they entered the land of Canaan? What was the mission that the kings, the 3 kings of that united kingdom, were to accomplish? Wasn't it to build the temple? And that temple would become the permanent tabernacle, and that temple would represent the Messiah who was coming. So that responsibility was really awesome. And Moses was carrying it out as he was instructed to do. But then, as you know, he was not able to enter the land of Canaan. Instead, Joshua took over the responsibility of leading them at that time. God wouldn't let him go into the land, even though he asked God again and again. So something in that transition from Moses' leadership to Joshua's was lost. Because even though Moses laid hands on Joshua and prayed for him, he was not the same leader that Moses was. He didn't have the same experiences. But Reverend Moon has told us that the first thing that the people were supposed to do when they entered the land of Canaan was build the temple. It wasn't to wait until there was a king to build it. It wasn't meant to wait until the time of Saul and David and Solomon, who finally built it. It was to be built as the very first thing when they entered the land of Canaan. They were meant to carry in the ark and the tabernacle and all these things into Canaan in front of the 30-some kings that lived there. They were meant to do that. And those kings were meant to revere and honor the tabernacle and the law that came on the 10 Commandments. And in doing this, their kingdoms would survive. And this is what Moses was meant to do when he brought the people into the land of Canaan. And he was to tell those kings, if you don't respect us and this tabernacle and these laws, you will lose your kingdom. It will be destroyed. Now, because that didn't happen, You know the history of the settlement of Israel. It took generations of war. Joshua himself fought many battles, but even at the end of his life, the entire land of Canaan was not settled, and it was not yet Israelite territory, and they continued to fight until the time of Saul, who was a great warrior against the Philistines, and he became the first king, but they still didn't have the temple. And we don't know what happened to the tabernacle. We do know that the Ark of the Covenant went from kind of one sanctuary to another. But even it was at times captured by the foreign cultures or the other cultures. So the Israelites were really in a desperate situation always. And what eventually happened? They became exiles. Their land was taken away from them, and they became slaves and servants in other kingdoms. All this is because they did not build the temple first. That's what they were meant to do. Before they established anything else, before they built homes, before they built schools for their children, they were meant to build the temple. And because they didn't, they had so much trouble there. So I'm saying all this because, right now, we're in the midst of the time of preparing for the opening of our International Peace Education Center, right? Which we have on the screen behind me in Las Vegas, right? It's going to be opened in just a few weeks, I believe. First with a 7-day workshop for education. For those who would like to go there, I think you're all welcome to join if you'd like to go. That's my understanding. But what is the purpose of this International Peace Education Center? It's the place to bring world leaders to study about peace, to understand divine principle, to see the work of the Family Federation and all those associated organizations that are part of it, to help bring peace. I remember long ago, I'm talking about a generation ago, at the time we were doing the outreach to Christian ministers through ACLC. Remember we got that big, nice truck from our father? And we were serving the churches with it and trying to educate ministers, and a book of speeches and a video cassette was sent out to, how many was it, 7,000 churches and ministers? All of this was Father's effort to bring harmony in the religious sphere. And I remember at that time I heard something about Father brought these ministers from Korea to come to the USA, just as he was sending Christian ministers from the USA to Korea for education. And Father said he brought these ministers because he said the Christian ministers in Korea were so afraid of anything that had to do with touching something that was a little bit dirty. I'm probably not putting it in the right words, but he wanted to bring them to Las Vegas because they could see gambling. They could see the culture. And you know the culture there. It's kind of, in a way, it's the one place in America where you can go to do things that aren't legal in other places. I'm putting it maybe mildly. Sin City is what I'm talking about. And Jesus would walk among the lepers, the prostitutes, the tax collectors, and it was his culture. He wanted to take care of Israel, and he was willing to start from the bottom to do so, to teach the people. So this is why Father brought them there, to help them understand the need for the churches to go to the bottom of society to minister for those who are in need, not just at the top of society. So, way back then, 20, 30 years ago, you could see what Father was already thinking about the future. And the significance of Las Vegas and that culture. Okay? So when we think about this Peace Temple or International Peace Education Center, I'm thinking about what its significance is for us as a country. What's meant to happen there? I believe we're meant to restore the problems that happened in Israel when they didn't first build the temple and respect it. And I think that's why headquarters has been asking us for our time, for our donations to help build this. And although all our efforts to do things for the sake of God help build world peace, this in particular is very significant at this time. Because if we accomplish this task, and if this building is used for the purpose it was meant to be used for, then amazing things can happen. At least that's my belief. Because when you put God first before anything else, what God is asking you to do, if you put that first, not second or third or fourth, or somewhere down the line where I get time, I'll do it, then things begin to go better for you and for your family. You know, there are certain things God asks us to do. If we do them, he says, I'll help you with the rest of it. Right? This is what the churches have been teaching about tithing for a long, long time. You honor God first, and he'll help you take care of the rest. So, just as the Israelites were meant to build that temple to protect their land, to protect their country, their families, from all these 30-some tribes of Canaan that didn't want them there, and which this nation of Israel is still struggling with today, then in the same way, if we put things first that are meant to be first, it will go better for us. And I believe that's exactly what could happen at this International Peace Center in Las Vegas. So that temple in Israel was meant to be the seed of fortune for their country. If they took care of it first, things would go well. But if they didn't, things would not go well. And that's exactly what happened. So a building can have amazing significance. Just one building, one thing can have amazing significance. So the prophecy that Christy read for us this morning from the 2nd chapter of Isaiah about all the nations of the world would come to Israel, and the people would want to go up to the house of Jacob in his temple and study his ways and be educated by him and follow his paths in order to build world peace. I think that's exactly what could happen at the Peace Center. So, Las Vegas, it's such an interesting place. How many have been there? Has everyone? Maybe half. You know, Las Vegas is on the other side of the Sierra Nevada mountains. It's in the desert. But in Father's mind, it's on the Pacific Rim. I always thought that was a little bit funny, but you know, if you get in the car and you drive from Los Angeles, which is, you know, on the coast, you can get to Las Vegas in a few hours. It's not a long drive. So really, it's very close to the West Coast, but it just happens to be on the other side of the mountains. Those are not such tall mountains in that area. So Las Vegas is a place that's out in the middle of the desert, but it's got these amazing things that are so close to it. It's got the Grand Canyon and Bryce Canyon National Park, and there's many amazing things over there. There's Sedona, Arizona, and special places that are kind of like, for people who are gifted spiritually, they want to go to that area because of certain things that are more open there than other places in the U.S. It's also, as I mentioned, though, the place where vice is particularly strong, right? Gambling and prostitution were legalized there long ago, several generations ago. The first place in the country to do these things. So it had the nickname Sin City. But in Father's mind, it should become the shining city where God's love is present. And just as Jesus wanted it to go to the lower areas of society to teach the people, Father wants to see Las Vegas turned around completely and become a place where family values are taught and God's blessing and God's goodness comes there. So he would like to see it be called by a completely different name than Sin City, and was willing to make the effort, after many other efforts in America, to kind of pioneer this place. I don't know, beginning maybe around 10 years ago, you began to hear Father talking more and more about Las Vegas. You know, he tried on the East Coast. There was the Washington Times newspaper in our capital, and many things in New York City and Boston and Chicago. Chicago had ACLC. You know, if you think about all the efforts Father made on the eastern seaboard, what really came of all those things? It didn't do what he had hoped it to do. It didn't turn this nation around. I think at some point, the West and Las Vegas and the Pacific Rim era was Father's big hope. Big, meaning because he could see that the response he'd been looking for on the establishment side of the country wasn't coming. So we are living in the Pacific Rim era, and Las Vegas is on the Pacific Rim, and the Peace Center is being built there, and we're so close to it. I think we have amazing fortune here. You can get in a car and you could drive to Las Vegas if you wanted to, even in just about one day. It'd be a lot of driving, but if you had someone to share that with, driving with you, you could do it in about one day. We used to do it from Seattle in about that time. So I feel like as we're on this verge of opening this Peace Center, and there will be activities inviting world leaders to come there and study. You know, if you think about the big goal of the unity of North and South Korea, are they going to go from one country to the other so easily to sit down together and really talk peace? I don't think so. But would they want to come to a place like Las Vegas, a beautiful place like this? I think so. I can see these kinds of things happening because here in the U.S. we have the reputation of being a country that's different from the rest of the world. My cousin was just visiting me from Europe. I spent the week with her in driving around, you know, explaining things about America to her. This might have been the first time she's been here. I don't remember her saying anything about a previous visit. She was amazed by so many things that are going on here. She attended at Windermere the Universal Peace Federation's once a month dinner, and she heard people talking about peace, and she was kind of amazed at what's going on in the USA. Her country's a little country, you know, a population of about one state here. So it's a big country to the rest of the world, and we're doing amazing things. And we may not always be exactly on track, but when it comes to bringing world peace, people are hoping that America will be the nation to do it, because the other nations have too much history behind them. Israel and the other countries of the Middle East, the Arab nations, it's so difficult for them even to get in the same room together. Whereas here, you know, we're all living together. You have a synagogue and a mosque just down the street from one another. They pass each other daily on the street. It's different, isn't it? So this nation really has an amazing opportunity, I think, now. I know some of you students in high school or college can probably answer this quite easily, but what is the meaning of the word Pacific? It means calm, doesn't it? That's why the first people who saw it gave it that name. It means peace or peaceful. This Pacific Rim era that we are really beginning to enter now is a time that I feel we haven't seen before. And we can do amazing things now. And, we had that little Camp Mazumdar up in the mountains of outside Los Angeles. It really got run down. And it's really not a place to bring people who are really, to stay in a little unheated cabin for a workshop, to study divine principle. This is a place you could bring anybody to. You can invite the mayor of your city to come there. You can invite anybody. This is a beautiful place prepared for you and your guests, whoever they might be. Here on the West Coast. There's no other facility like it here on the West Coast, even around the country. And as far as our church is concerned, it's the first of such facilities. We have what's called the first Peace Palace in Korea. We have a second one that was planned in Switzerland but was not yet built. And we have this one now that we're ready to inaugurate in just such a short time. Well, I have great hope for it and for us and for our country and for the world because of it. And our outreach can go to a new level because of it. So I know in a couple of weeks, on starting May 11th, we've got our special outreach week that we're planning. Unfortunately, I don't know if we'll be able to invite those people, but I'm thinking soon we will be able to bring just about anyone. There'll be many events planned there. And our result can go up because when you have a place like this to bring people to, it makes a difference. Wouldn't you like to go there and spend a week? Wouldn't you like to go around to other places, the Grand Canyon, after you've been there a week studying and see beautiful places that are unique in America and the world? I would. I'm not trying to sell you on anything, I've just been inspired as I was studying this week a little bit about the opening of the Peace Palace. And I'm really happy it's here. I want to thank you for your donations that you gave to help make this happen. And I hope and pray that we can bring world peace